I thought I would always be somebody who worked in corporate and climbed the corporate ladder to be bigger, better, earn more money, and manage bigger teams and even bigger projects. It was really the only thing I was planning on doing. And I won't lie, I was and still am an ambitious cat. I find it really interesting that this is where I ended up, working from home in Melbourne, working day in and day out with amazing women in business, plus working with global multinational organisations to deliver their employer branding projects. It's a pretty exciting place to be, but it's really not where I ever imagined or pictured myself. Growing up in Melbourne to what I thought was a pretty middle-class home, I was fortunate enough to have parents that always looked at giving us, my sister and I, the best chance when it came to our life and education. I was born in South Africa in 1976. My parents had lived through the apartheid system, and with my mother classified as coloured and my dad being fair, was assumed to be white, there were some pretty interesting and what I always thought sad stories they shared with us. One night, my parents were travelling with my sister and I. We stopped at a motel for the night and my dad went in to book the room. The person behind the desk said yes. Not a problem. There was a room available. When my dad went to get my mum, my sister and I, the same person said they had no rooms left. It's just not something I can even imagine going through, and it broke my heart to hear that my mum had to experience that. When I was barely 2, my parents migrated to Melbourne, Australia, with $50 in their pocket. When we arrived in Melbourne, we lived with my grandparents in a little 2-bedroom unit in Camberwell. Yes, that's right, 6 people in a 2-bedroom unit. Cosy. My mum and dad worked and always gave us a happy home, which is what I remember. That and the swearing cockatoo my grandpa owned, who would greet us at breakfast time with a very loving, "Good morning, darling." The cockatoo, that is, not my grandpa. Once we moved into our own unit, I remember sprinklers in the front yard and icy poles during hot summers. I remember our Labrador Nicky running around, tearing holes and eating the corners of the couch. I remember playing with the neighbours and riding our bikes up and down the 3-unit driveway. A pretty typical Melbourne upbringing. My dad had had his own business in South Africa, but was now working in a factory in Melbourne as a supervisor. Whilst he was still in a job, he started up Garcia Doors on the side. He eventually left his job and went into his own business full-time, which he still runs today. We moved again when I was 7, then years later, after being at the local high school for 3 years and not doing well, because it wasn't cool to do well, my parents sent me to a private school in Melbourne, where I successfully sat for a scholarship. I joined Kilvington Girls Grammar, now co-ed, in Year 10, at 15 years of age, which is never an easy thing to do. But I was fortunate to find a group of girls who I still keep in contact with today, who were always fun and supportive and great to be around.